Good afternoon. Good afternoon and blessings. Okay, you know, I thank God for this opportunity to share knowledge with you. Least we perish for lack of it. And that's Hosea now, 4:6. You can read upon it. And boy, if this is not a time to share real knowledge, I don't know where there is or when there is. There's a project afloat by the Republicans, that is if they win, called the 2025 Project, which will take us back at least 60 years. But we'll talk about that later. But right now, I want to thank my crew, producers Sheila Brown Bird, Lula Williams Salvador, and my advisor, Juanita McClure, my engineer, Norm, and my co-host, King Professor Terry Benjamin, and also my promo crew, Salame and Elijah. Of course, you all know me. I'm Ruby Williams Shivers, your unapologetic amateur, still looking for experts, and that's in Africanism. Now, we're dedicated this month, July, as Reparation Month. Remember, though, you heard it here first, right? The whole month is Reparation Month. Because I'm convinced that reparation is the elephant in the room. We achieve that, and everything else will fall into place. We should be resolute in demanding our reparation. Nothing else suffices. We should be working around the clock, not a moment to rest. See, we slacked off a little bit when we got President Obama. But we soon realized that that was not the answer. That's right. That's right. Our struggle has never failed. It's never ended. That's right. It's failed, but it was never ended, I should say. Yeah. From the time we jumped overboard the slave ships coming through the Middle Passage, from the time of the emissary when we commandeered the ship that was bringing us to these shores, from the time of Nat Turner, who was given a message from God. You remember, it said, let my people go, rescue my people, and to the slave owners, let my people go. To Sojourner Truth, Harriet Tubman, be free or die. Yes. To John Brown, a white man who said all God's children need to be free, and was hanged as a result of his effort. To Dr. Martin Luther King and the freedom fighters. That's right. You know, to Malcolm X, El-Hajj Malik al-Shabazz, to Nelson and Winnie Mandela, to the Honorable Elijah Muhammad and the Nation of Islam, to the Panthers, and now the Black Liberation Movement. We have fought. The fights now have culminated to a decree. All of them made it possible for us to say now, pay us for what you owe us. That's right. That's right. Number one, our free labor. 2, for the murders. 3, for the rape. 4, for the lynching. 5, for the stripping of us of all that we had. Our language, our culture, our religion. We will then be in a position of respectability that we deserve and will never get as long as we are looking for handouts like affirmative action, etc. No one has to give us anything. Whatever we get is owed to us. And not just as another group that's been victimized, but as a special group who has been regularly set upon to deprive us of our humanity. That's right. Now, many of us can't even understand that and will not understand it until we have learned to think beyond the obvious. We see what is obvious. We are obviously behind in health, wealth, and education. And many of us still don't understand why. When you hear us say, we are our worst enemy, or we don't stick together, or we are crabs in the barrel, that comes from the inability to think beyond our circumstances. That's right. That's why the majority of us need those minority amongst us who I classify as experts in Africanism, with extraordinary insight and learned knowledge of how to undertake and systematic approaches, to undertake systematic approaches to identify and define the 200 years of unspeakable grief
Yes, yes.
that separates our experiences from any other group known to man.
That's right. That's right.
We should see reparation as a drowning man will see a boat passing by and he grabs on, but he knows if he gets in the boat, he has a chance. But if he remains hanging from the boat, anything could pull him off.
That's right.
A shark,
That's right. Anything.
or a fish,
Never. Yeah.
fish hook,
That's right.
or the 2025 project. So let's talk reparation. And I have a great guest today. At least we're expecting a great guest today. The brother has been here before. We just had to get him back on board because he's just so knowledgeable.
That's right. That's right.
Now my co-host will introduce him and we will talk about reparation.
That's right. That's right.
So do we have our guest? If not, we'll talk about something else until.
Oh, yeah, we go.
Oh, yes,
okay.
we have our guest.
Wow.
Yes, we have. Welcome, my brother.
Good afternoon. Good afternoon.
And let me welcome you in the proper way. My brother. Well, here we are again. Okay. And can you hear me, brother Bill?
Yes, sir.
Okay,
Absolutely.
good, okay, yeah. You know, because you've been here before, I like to say he's a man that needs no introduction. But because we're really focused on a particular topic this particular time, reparations, and I guess by way of introduction, maybe you can just, for the audience, I'm sure everybody knows what it is, but could you just break it down in terms of, and also, I've heard you speak before, and you said it's not just about money. So could you just sort of bring all that in together for us, please, brother?
Absolutely. And I am honored to be back with you again today. I think that the topic is one that is certainly needs a lot of discussion.
Yes, please.
And a lot of understanding. And so for people that may not know, Africans were brought to North Central South America and were enslaved for several hundred years. Some people use the 1619 date, which is the date that the British came to Jamestown. But in reality, even in the 1500s, the Portuguese and the Spanish had Africans enslaved in North America. And so reparations is repair. That people of African ancestry, the only group that have never been financially compensated for the several hundred years that our ancestors were in slavery. And in addition to that, we should also recognize the fact that the wealth of the country was largely derived from the labor that Africans who were enslaved provided. And so in this country, sugar, cotton, tobacco were three of the main crops that were harvested in order for wealth to be generated. And to add just a little bit more to it, to give people a little more understanding about it, in the Homestead Act in 1862, white people were giving 160 acres of land when the country was moving west. And so for people of African ancestry, since our ancestors were in slavery, we were not eligible to receive this 160 acres of land. In New Jersey, and for people that may not remember, New Jersey was the last northern state to end slavery. New Jersey has the largest wealth gap between blacks and white in the country, in addition to having the highest disproportionate rate of incarceration of black men in the country. And so for Europeans who enslaved Africans here, they were given 150 acres of land. And so when we look at the reality of what's transpired, people of African ancestry here as well as across the country, what we see is that there's a significant wealth gap nationwide. If we look at the education disparity, African American children academically do not perform as well as children from other groups. If we look at the wealth gap, there's a high correlation between income and academic achievement. And so if we really want to see our community improve, one last thing that I would add is when we looked at what happened during COVID, when so many people of African ancestry were killed, because we have a high cholesterol, diabetes, blood pressure, a lot of different health challenges. And so what I'm advocating for is that not only should people receive individual checks, but we should have dollars earmarked to strengthen our healthcare options, to have dollars earmarked to make sure academically we're able to excel. If you look at the home ownership gap, we should be able to have dollars earmarked so that we'd be able to purchase homes, which is the fundamental building block for increasing wealth. And so this topic is a much needed topic of conversation. The better that we understand it, easier it is for us to move it forward. In a historical context, in 1989, our brother John Conyers, who's an ancestor now, was a congressman out of Detroit, introduced H.R. 40. So for 35 years, this topic of reparations has been approached, or at least suggested, in the United States Congress. Sheila Jackson Lee, who's from Texas, is now the chair, trying to move this process forward. And so in New Jersey, there are two bills, one in the Senate, one in the Assembly, to deal with reparations in New Jersey. And so there's been steps taken. As a community, we need to put more pressure on all the legislators, statewide, nationally, so that we can actually see reparations go forward. One last point, for those people that may not know, there's an organization called the Institute for Social Justice. The Institute for Social Justice has embarked on a reparations task force. They've, brought together some of the most prominent scholars in the region to examine how reparations should be provided, or should be, provided in New Jersey. And so recognizing the fact that if we continue to move our legislators forward, sooner or later they're going to say, yes, we need to study it. And so we would have our own information to make sure that whatever study they undertake, we have documentation to demonstrate what and how the dollars should be accommodated to us. So there's a lot on that skeleton, but we need more pressure in order to make sure that we actually get across the finish line with this topic.
Thank you. Thank you for that. Thank you so much. And it's so interesting that we're talking about it at this time when we have a situation, that's coming up, this upcoming election, and we know that Republicans are not going to talk about this at all. But do you have a sense that the Democrats would at least honor this idea, but with something serious? I mean, not just lip service.
Well, I understand it. It's a valid point. Probably not. And so, because you think about New Jersey, is a blue state, right? Yeah. We have a Democratic governor, Democratic leader of the Assembly, Democratic leader of the Senate, and the word reparations for those Democrats is something that they're uncomfortable with. Okay. So they tried to propose that we call it, closing the wealth gap, because white people are so opposed to the word reparations. Right. And so the Institute for Social Justice even started a campaigns for people to say the word reparations. And so the Japanese, when they would put in internment camps, would receive reparations. Yes. The Jews, after they were through the Holocaust, received reparations. And while the United States violated treaties with the indigenous people, commonly mistakenly called Indians, they did receive compensation. The only group that has ever been enslaved that has never received any compensation. I mean, you may remember during the Civil War, as the Civil War was ending, there was this whole idea of we're supposed to get 40 acres and a mule. Yeah, that did not happen. And so if we were to calculate, there were 4 million Africans that were, quote unquote, freed at the end of the Civil War. And if we calculated the 40 acres and a mule times the 4 million Africans who were liberated at that time, there would be trillions of dollars that would be owed to us. And that was 150 years ago. And so I am confident that it's going to take more work for us as a community. Even in our own community, there are people who oppose the idea of reparations. And so just educating ourselves about why it's so important and what needs to happen in terms of actually, and I think that some of us don't want to think about it because they don't think it's going to happen. When Barack Obama got elected, very few, if anybody, thought a black president would ever happen in the United States. Right. And so because of all there are places in the country that are doing it. California is doing it. Evanston, Illinois is doing it. New York State has already passed their bill to study the issue of reparations. So there's places in the country where reparations is already manifesting. And so it's up to us in New Jersey to continue to push. The last thing is that President Biden under executive order, because when Abraham Lincoln signed Emancipation Proclamation, that was an executive order. Joe Biden, if he continues to stay in his race, could sign an executive order saying that there should be a study and that reparations should be provided. So it's up to us to bring the pressure that's needed in order for reparations to come to pass.
You know, Brother Dave, that's why I fight so seriously about the notion of us redefining those things that we think are important and those things that are specific to us. Least we allow other people to keep redefining or keep defining, not redefine. They define us for what we are, just slave. We were not slaves in the 200 years over here. You know, there was no comparison to who, quote, slavery was, so we should get a name. If they want to change reparation for just for us, we should not allow that. We should not even contemplate that. That should not be a question. It is reparation, and reparation for us should not be considered under the same terms as reparation for anyone else. Because, as you just mentioned, reparation for us would be the free labor that we gave. Not only the free, we could sue them for the rape. We could sue them for the murder. We could sue them for the lynching. All that should be combined. Now, what I suggest as an amateur, I suggest in terms of our compensation and reparation, though, we get free housing. We don't have them negotiating the term. We get free housing. We get free medical care. We get free schooling. Similar to what they got, and they weren't enslaved. You know, right after the World War I or something, they built all those houses for them because they understood that would help them get back to where they needed to be. So we don't need to be negotiating how much we need. Just say all African folks who get under the reparation, we get free housing, we get free medical care, we get free schooling. That will settle that. Now the money compensation, I personally would not suggest to give it to any one of us a check. Give it those experts in Africanism that I define here on this show every week, those who will have studied and we're confident that they will be able to get together as a group to decide what we do with the finances until we are ready, till we accumulate some of the stuff we need to spend our money back in our community. Because if we got the money right now, and I needed El Dorado, or whatever you need right now, or Lamborghini, or whatever, I would have to go to them to get it. I want to be able to, when we get that cash money in our hand, we could spend it within our group as we did when we were right out of slavery and created all the stuff we did for it. So we can do it. It's just a matter of us thinking beyond our circumstances. See, many of us now, we're very knowledgeable people, we're educated, with all that, but we have not been able to think beyond our circumstances. We see our circumstances as being the least of everything. We health, wealth, and we think it's our fault, many of us. And that's why I know it's going to need folks like yourself, other experts who can put all this together under an umbrella of studying specifically what happened to us and why we need special attention, why we need special people. I make analysis all the time. I talk about this virus, and you mentioned that earlier. When that virus came along, we didn't just grab anyone off the street. We didn't just grab a celebrity. We didn't even grab the president of the United States, but guess what he said? Inject bleach. So we knew it needs special people who had studied specifically about this particular virus, and not just any virus, because there was the flu, the whatever else. But this particular virus that would be able to come up with a solution. That was what ailing us. 200 million people were killed across the world. Well, there were more than that killed going through the Middle Passage with us. And in addition to that, after we got here, there was a kind of undescribable treatment that we went through. So we need folks who can put that in perspective. That way we won't think beyond. See, we see what the reality of our lives is. We see and we see what is real in terms of We are the least, as I said, in terms of education, in terms of wealth, in terms of health, and some of us even believe, like you say, don't want reparation. Well, we don't need to use those people because we know they're suffering from post-traumatic slave syndrome. And once we
Hmm.
can identify those things at real, other folks will begin to respect our ability to identify something that happened to us 200 years ago. But if we dismiss that and assume we are just like anyone else, we are not. We've been brain dirtied, as my friend would say. We've been brain damaged. So we need people who can get together under an umbrella called Africanism to study us, define us, and then suggest solutions to cure what ails us. Until that happens, we need our reparation.
And so when I mentioned the Institute for Social Justice, they are embarking on that work right now. And they do have, in fact, if you go to their website, which is njisj.org, NJ, New Jersey Institute for Social Justice, njisj.org. And then on their page, it will say take action. And it actually lists activities that the council is doing. It lists activities that we as a community can do. And so I agree with some of the point that you raised. I mean, and so we do, sadly, we only spend 2 cents of every dollar with a Black-owned business. And so, yes, we should be better educated at whatever point we do receive individual checks. We should also be really clear that our advocacy is for institution building, because the institutions that provide service and information to us are going to be critical for us to be able to take the next steps as a community that we need to face. We also should be mindful of the fact that reparations throughout the Caribbean, there's an organization in the Caribbean that's advocating for reparations for Caribbean countries. African countries should be advocating for reparations because of how many millions of Africans were taken out. And they took out the smartest, the strongest, all of those things. And so Africa as a continent was depopulated, and major segments of our community with different various skills were removed. I mean, so this reparations, there's a brother by the name of Hillary Beckles, Beckles, Hillary Beckles. This brother, who is originally from Barbados, he is now second in charge at the University of the West Indies, is an expert on reparations throughout the world. And so what they're doing in Barbados, throughout the Caribbean, because of the fact that when our families there did not have enough food, because sugarcane was such a major crop, they would take sugar and put sugar in the water. And then because of the sugar in the water, they have phenomenal levels of diabetes. So now they are perfecting amputation processes to help the families who are impacted by diabetes. And so they have taken the idea that you just spoke about. If we look at the major ills in the community, what are the specific steps we need to take to address them?
Right.
And so if high blood pressure is a problem, if cholesterol is a problem, what are the specific health remedies that we need to see take place for that? If home ownership is an issue, yes, for those people who still need a home, if they can get it free, for those of us who own homes, can we get some type of consideration? I mean, so there are various segments of how this point of conversation should be considered, but we should also recognize that our struggle is not just here, that the struggle for reparations is across the planet, and we have people across the planet who are actively involved in it. The last point I want to raise is that I mentioned before about a sister named Queen Mother Moore. Queen Mother Moore was one of the people that worked with Marcus Garvey. Queen Mother Moore went to the United Nations in the 1950s to demand reparations. And so we have been advocating for reparations for an incredible long time. And so, but what has not happened yet, we have not had the synergy that we need and actually to make reparations actually happen. But the more we talk about it, the more we give people exposure to it, the more we help people understand what role they can and should play in terms of moving the agenda forward. That will be, let's just come back to New Jersey for a second. Governor Murphy won his last election by 1 percentage point. The difference in the election was that 96% of black people voted for Phil Murphy. And so when we look at what the Murphy administration is providing for the black community in New Jersey, reparations should be high up on the list. But because Coughlin, who is the director of the Assembly, and Satari, who's director of the Senate, have not released the reparations bill for a vote, Murphy said that he would sign it, got to his desk. And so the New Jersey Black Legislative Caucus needs to be advocating for reparations. The NAACP, Black fraternities and sororities, the Urban League, the Masons. I mean, you go down the line, do we have organizations that are actually advocating for reparations so that we can see we have an epidemic of violence in our community? Some places have identified it as a public health crisis, right? I mean, so there are some very clear things that need to happen that would make the lives of black people in New Jersey as well as other places much better. But it's up to us to really do the work that we need to do as far as being able to make sure that it happens.
Exactly. Yeah. And when you find the majority of us don't even know what side is up. No, we don't. You know what I'm saying? And that's no slam on anybody. That's what happened when you were under a gun for 200 years. Of course. Plus the last 200 of racism and all that other stuff. Yeah. But the particular 200 years that saw us under a condition unlike any other human being in the annals of history, of course. You would expect us to come out not understanding, not knowing. As I said before, we're some of the most educated people now in the world. We're just so articulate. We know that we're from Harvard and all that other, but we have not, the majority of us, even the ones from Harvard, have not been able to think beyond the circumstance. They see the circumstances of us, and they know. We all know where we are, the position we're in. We know where it comes from.